In considering Hamlet, I want you to remember a little something about Martin Luther and the doctrine of sola fides, faith alone, which said that faith alone will determine whether or not you are essentially on the way to heaven. You will be justified, you will be saved based on the merit of your faith alone, not on anything you do. A primary objection of the Protestant Reformation is that you going around and just being nice, tossing a nickel in a homeless person's can on the sidewalk, that was enough to earn you a spot in heaven. Now, Luther would say that, well, it's nice if you do that, but do you really think God saw that? Do you really think that matters? Are you going to argue with God? Good deeds don't matter in a Lutheran theology. And Luther begat Calvin, which begat, in a way, the Church of England, or at least a thread of it. And Shakespeare is coming along at the end of that tumultuous 17th century, or 15th century, 16th century, sorry. I get my centuries mixed up. Shakespeare knew that something new was introduced to the world with sola fide. We don't have any evidence of Shakespeare writing about this or thinking about this or talking to anyone about this, but if you read the works, it becomes apparent. The interior vastly outstrips the exterior in Shakespearean valuation. What you do is one thing. Who you are may be something entirely different. Who you are is something internal. It is a valuation of something that nobody else can see. Maybe not even you. But that distinction between the two is of primary importance throughout the modern era. And the Renaissance, as it is known, is also known as the early modern era. So if previous art, previous works of literature seem a little bizarre from time to time, by the time we land in the Renaissance, the early modern era, we can start to see the outlines of who we are as people, where we understand differences between what we do and who we are. And we might value those differently, but it's baked into our understanding of human nature that there is a difference between the interior and the exterior. And the interior starts to take on vast new potential. When you look at the Mona Lisa, the most hypnotic aspect of that, otherwise, I would argue, fairly ordinary portrait. The most significant aspect is her eyes, her face in general, where you look at it and you're not quite sure what's going on there. You're not quite sure what she's thinking. There are, I don't know, a couple million papers written about whether or not she's smiling or frowning in that painting. But that's just another example of people not knowing what she's thinking. But what we know is that she is thinking something. There's something going on behind those eyes that is very rich, very complicated, and infinite in its scope. which kind of makes you think of God. God can think in infinite scope, right? But the Renaissance introduces us to the idea that so can man. This is humanism. So when we come to Shakespeare, we find characters again and again infinite in their scope, in ways that exceed or even belie their actual activities on stage. You can watch a Shakespeare play and be thoroughly caught up in the plot and the conflicts with the characters, the jokes. He has a lot of them. Less so in Hamlet than others, but you know, he's a funny guy. But that's just the surface stuff. What's really going on is the underneath stuff. Now, you can write an awful lot about the plot and the characters, and there's a lot going on there, and he was a genius about that. And as we go through Shakespeare, we will be looking an awful lot at that. But all the while, you have to understand that underneath that surface, there is this roiling magma of significance that throws out little flares from time to time. And, what? Huh? You can ignore those. You can skim right past them and say, I don't have the time. You're forgiven for that. But if you invest that time, it only makes the comparison between the interior and the exterior more significant. It only makes the surface stuff richer to know the subterranean. Sola fide, the interior value. Hamlet himself is obviously a prime example of this Lutheran revolution. He is infinite. He is a mass of contradictions. He is described at various times as both a student and a soldier, a man of thought and a man of action. But at key points in the show, the play, the surface activity, at key points, those identities fail him. That's human. That's normal. This is not a simple adventure tale like we might see a hero undertake in Gilgamesh or the Aeneid or even the Odyssey. Those characters have richness underneath the surface, and we're always trying to figure out what they're thinking, but it's usually not that hard. With Hamlet, it's hard. It's very, very difficult to make sense of him as a character. It's very difficult to make sense of him as a human being. He is maddening. But that's part of the challenge. Everybody likes having simple people to know. It's really easy to predict what they're going to do in a given circumstance. Makes them fairly dependable friends to have. But understanding the unpredictable ones, that can make you a better person. That can enrich your life. That can surprise you. because it is that engagement with the unknowability that brings you into the process of becoming like God.